Tonight, from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Library, in a place dedicated to the memory of this Republican icon in the 100th year after his birth.
Thank you.
We will hear from the 8 candidates who would like to claim his legacy. They're all here tonight, ready to explain and defend their positions on job creation, on spending, debt, and taxes, on America's costly dual wars, and the toxic gridlock that is Washington, D.C.
Live from the Reagan Library in Simi Valley, California, the Republican candidates debate. Here now are Brian Williams and John Harris.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome. Thank you especially for joining us here in this spectacular space, this spectacular presidential library, where we are all gathered under the wings of Air Force One. We're going to get right to it tonight because we have a lot of candidates on stage, a lot of issues to talk about, and for the next hour and 45 minutes, give or take, along with my colleague and friend John Harris of the website Politico, we will be putting questions to the 8 candidates on stage tonight. By agreement, they will have 1 minute to answer and then 30 seconds for follow-up or rebuttal, as they say, at the moderator's discretion. There will be no opening or closing statements during this debate tonight. With that out of the way, we're going to start with jobs and the economy. The numbers from our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll this week are candidly jaw-dropping. The country thinks the economy is going to get worse before it gets better. A majority of people in this country now believe the Republican policies of the first 8 years of the past decade are responsible for the economic mess we're in. And we should quickly add, a majority also don't believe the current Democratic president has set the right policies to fix the fix we're in. Question is really, who can? Governor Perry, we're going to begin with you. You're the newcomer here on stage. You probably saw this coming a mile away. You have touted your state's low taxes, the lack of regulation, tough tort reform as the recipe for job growth in the Lone Star State. But Texas ranks last among those who have completed high school. There are only 8 other states with more living in poverty. No other state has more working at or below the minimum wage. So is that the kind of answer all Americans are looking for?
Actually, what Americans are looking for is someone can get this country working again. And we put the model in place in the state of Texas. When you look at what we have done over the last decade, we created 1 million jobs in the state of Texas. At the same time, America lost 2.5 million. So I will suggest to you that Americans are focused on the right issue, and that is who on this stage can get America working, because we know for a fact the resident of the White House cannot.
But you know by now the counter argument to that is the number of low-wage jobs and the fact that unemployment is better in over half the states of the union than it is right now in Texas.
Well, the first part of that comment is incorrect, because 95% of all the jobs that we've created have been above minimum wage. So I'm proud of what we've done in the state of Texas. And for the White House or anyone else to be criticizing creation of jobs now in America, I think is a little bit hypocritical. You want to create jobs in America. You free the American entrepreneur to do what he or she does, which is risk their capital. And I'll guarantee you the entrepreneur in America, the small businessman and woman, they're looking for a president that will say, we're going to lower the tax burden on you, and we're going to lower the regulation impact on you, and free them to do what they do best, create jobs.
Governor Romney, over to you. You've opened the door on this topic, at least where Governor Perry is concerned. Despite your own private sector experience, as you know, Massachusetts ranked only 47th in job creation during your tenure as governor. As for your private sector experience, as Governor Perry's strategist recently put it, consisted of being, quote, a buyout specialist. Your response to that?
Well, not terribly accurate, at least with regards to the latter. And our state, I'm happy to take a look at the Massachusetts record, because when I came in as governor, we were in a real free fall. We were losing jobs every month. We had a budget that was way out of balance. So I came into office, we went to work as a team, and we were able to turn around the job losses. And at the end of 4 years, we had our unemployment rate down to 4.7%. That's a record I think the president would like to see. As a matter of fact, we created more jobs in Massachusetts than this president has created in the entire country. The policies that will get us working again as a nation are policies I understand having worked in the private sector. Look, if I'd spent my whole life in government, I wouldn't be running for president right now. My experience having started enterprises, having helped other enterprises grow and thrive, is what gives me the experience to put together a plan to help restructure the basis of America's economic foundation so we can create jobs again, good jobs, and compete with anyone in the world. This country has a bright future. Our president doesn't understand how the economy works. I do, because I've lived in it.
Time, Governor. Let's get a little bit more specific. Bain Capital, company you helped to form, among other things, often buys up companies, strips them down, gets them ready, resells them at a net job loss to American workers.
You know, that might be how some people would like to characterize what we did, but in fact, we started businesses at Bain Capital, and when we acquired businesses, in each case we tried to make them bigger, make them more successful and grow. The idea that somehow you can strip things down and it makes them more valuable is not a real effective investment strategy. We tried to make these businesses more successful. By the way, they didn't all work. But when it was all said and done, we looked at the record we'd had during the years I was there, we added tens of thousands of jobs to the businesses we helped support. That experience, succeeding, failing, competing around the world, is what gives me the capacity to help get this economy going again.
Time, I mentioned one more reference to being a career politician. Is it a disqualification to be in government all your career?
It's a fine profession. and if someone were looking to say, how can we restructure government, and which agency should report to which other agency, why, maybe that's the best background. If you're thinking about what it takes to reshape and update America's economy and to allow us to compete with China and other nations around the world, understanding how the economy works fundamentally is a credential I think is critical.
Governor Perry, a 30-second rebuttal. You've spent your career in that fine profession of elected office. Your reaction to that?
Well, Governor Romney left the private sector, and he did a great job of creating jobs in the private sector all around the world. But the fact is, when he moved that experience to government, he had one of the lowest job creation rates in the country. So the fact is, while he had a good private sector record, his public sector record did not match that. As a matter of fact, we created more jobs in the last 3 months in Texas than he created in 4 years in Massachusetts.
Well, let's widen this out, and let's bring in Mr. Cain on one side and
wait a second.
Senator. Go ahead, Mr. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, let's wait a second.
Oh, we could do this all evening.
Yeah, states are different. Texas is a great state. Texas has zero income tax. Texas has a right-to-work state, a Republican legislature, a Republican Supreme Court. Texas has a lot of oil and gas in the ground. Those are wonderful things. But Governor Perry doesn't believe that he created those things. If he tried to say that, why, it'd be like Al Gore saying he invented the internet. Look, the reality is there are differences. There are differences between states. I came into a state that was in real trouble. Huge budget gap, losing jobs every month. We turned it around. 3 out of 4 years, we had unemployment rate below the national average. We ended up with 4.7% unemployment rate. I'm proud of what we were able to do in a tough situation.
Time, Governor Perry.
I know back and forth, but Michael Dukakis created jobs 3 times faster than you did, Mitt.
Well, as a matter of fact, George Bush and his predecessor created jobs at a faster rate than you did, Governor.
That's not correct.
Yeah, it is correct.
Nice to see everybody came prepared for tonight's conversation. As I said, I'd like to bring in both wings here, figuratively, of course, Senator Santorum and Mr. Cain. Let's talk about this debate between public sector life's work and private sector life's work. You've spent your life's work, Mr. Cain, in the private sector, and Senator Santorum, most of yours in the public sector. Weigh in on what you're hearing.
Yeah, I think what people are looking for is someone to get something done. And that's what I have a track record of doing in Washington, D.C. Across the board, not just on economics, but on moral cultural issues, on national security issues, national defense issues. I've done things. We brought Democrats and Republicans together. I've put forward a plan because I think it's the best plan. But it's also the best plan if anybody here that actually can pass the Senate, which is probably going to have to have Democratic votes. And what I focused on was a sector of the economy that can get Democratic votes. We cut the corporate tax from 35% to 0. Because we want to build the great middle of America again, get those jobs that were shipped overseas by companies that were looking to make a profit because they couldn't any longer do it here, and bring those jobs back to America. We cut that corporate rate to 0. We passed repatriation to get that resources that are sitting overseas, $1.2 trillion, and we bring them back here. We'll create jobs, and I'll get Democratic votes to pass it. We'll bring things together because of those industrial straight Democrats, and I know because I'm from an industrial state, they will vote for this bill. You want to get something going, elect someone who knows how to get things done.
Time, Senator. Mr. Cain, same question.
Let's cut to the chase. This is what business people do and politicians don't do. Here's how I would fix this economy. First, eliminate the current tax code. It is a drain on entrepreneurs. It's the biggest barrier that's holding this economy back. And what I would do is to propose a bold plan, which I've already released. I call it my 999 economic growth plan. Throw out the current tax code, a 9% tax on corporate income, a 9% tax on personal income, and a 9% national sales tax. If 10% is good enough for God, 9% ought to be good enough for the federal government. This would replace all federal income taxes. It'll replace all federal income taxes. It will also replace the payroll tax, so everybody gets some skin in the game, and it replaces the capital gains tax. This economy is on life support. We do not need a solution that just trims around the edges. This is a bold plan and a bold solution. Additionally, with something as simple as 999, it gives us an easy mechanism to go after, help those cities that are the most blighted in terms of empowerment zones. And we can modify that very easily versus the current code.
Mr. Cain, thank you. Governor Huntsman, as you know, Governor Romney's new economic plan calls for the U.S. government to officially label China a currency manipulator. But the Wall Street Journal editorial page says such a move would cause a trade war, perhaps. You're a former ambassador to China. You have served 4 U.S. presidents. In your view, what does Governor Romney not get about China?
He doesn't get the part that what will fix the U.S.-China relationship, realistically, is fixing our core right here at home. Because our core is weak and it is broken, and we have no leverage at the negotiating table. And I'd have to say, Mitt, now is not the time in a recession to enter a trade war. Ronald Reagan flew this plane. I was in China during the trip in 1984. He went on TV and he spoke to the Chinese people. I'd love to do that too, in Chinese itself. And he talked in optimistic, glowing terms, and it reminds me about this, Brian. We are the most blue sky, optimistic people on earth. We're going to find solutions. And I have an offer for the 2 great governors over here. And I hate to rain on the parade of the great Lone Star governor, but as governor of Utah, we were the #1 job creator in this country during my years of service. That was 5.9% when you were creating jobs at 4.9%. And to my good friend Mitt, 47th just ain't going to cut it, my friend. Not when you can be first. We've got to remember that to beat President Obama, we have to have somebody who's been in the private sector, understands the fragility of the free market system, has been a successful governor as it relates to job creation, and knows something about this world. I've lived overseas 4 times. I've been an ambassador for my country 3 times. I think I understand that.
Governor Huntsman, time. Congresswoman Bachmann, over to you. Of all of you on this stage, you've been very vocal about wanting less regulation in American life. Which current federal regulations have been prohibitive or damaging in terms of your own small business?
Well, I think without a doubt, there's 2 that you look to. First of all are the new regulations that are just being put into place with Obamacare. As I go across the country and speak to small business people, men and women, they tell me that Obamacare is leading them to not create jobs. I spent 3 weekends going to restaurants, and I talked to a business owner who said, I have 60 people on my payroll. I have to let 10 go. At the same time, a 17-year-old girl came in and said, I'd like a job application for the summer. He said, I'm sorry, dear, I'm not hiring this summer. I'm actually letting people go. Obamacare is killing jobs. We know that from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, but I know it firsthand from speaking to people. We see it this summer. There were 47% of African-American youth that are currently without jobs, 36% of Hispanic youth. youth. I'm a mom. I've raised 5 biological kids and 23 foster kids in my home. One thing I know is that kids need jobs, and Obamacare is clearly leading to job-killing regulations, not job-creating regulations.
Congresswoman, thank you. Over to Congressman Paul. You're known as the absolutist in the bunch, someone who has consistently opposed federal government from having any role, and I think by your definition that isn't explicitly laid out in the Constitution. So this makes people curious. Is there a line with you? Where do you draw it? Does this include things like making cars safe, making medicine safe, air traffic control, controlling the jets above our heads?
Well, I think in theory, if you understood the free market and a free society, you don't need government to do that. And we live in a society where we have been adapted to this, and you can't just drop it all at once, but you can transition away from it. On regulations, no, I don't believe in any of these federal regulations, but that doesn't mean I don't believe in regulations. The regulation of the marketplace takes care of it. Just think if we had the regulations on the market that dealt with the bankruptcies, that had to go bankrupt. We wouldn't have been able to bail out the big banks and the big corporations and dump on the poor people. Well, so the market would dictate it. And you can't commit fraud. If you need detailed regulations, you can do it at the state level, but the federal government is not authorized to nitpick every little transaction. The way they use the interstate commerce clause is outrageous as far as I'm concerned.
Well, 30 seconds more for devil's advocate here, because would you then put it on the drug companies to say, no, we're bringing this to market, trust us, it's a fantastic drug. All the pilots in the sky to add to their responsibilities, their own air traffic control in an organic way.
What I said is theoretically it could be privatized, but who ends up doing the regulations on the drugs? They do as much harm as good. They don't take good care of us. Who gets to write the regulations? The bureaucrats write the regulations, but who writes the laws? The lobbyists have control. So the lobbyist from the drug industry has control of writing the regulations, so you turn it over to the bureaucracy, but you would have private institutions that could become credible. And I mean, do we need the federal government to tell us whether we buy a safe car? I say the consumers of America are smart enough to decide what kind of car they can buy and whether it's safe or not, and they don't need federal government hounding them and putting so much regulations on that our car industry has gone overseas.
Congressman, thank you. Over to Speaker Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, as you remember, you wrote the foreword to Rick Perry's most recent book called Fed Up, and you called him, quote, uniquely qualified to explain what's taking place with the economy. Does that mean in terms of job creation credentials he has your proxy at a gathering like this?
No, but it means if he wants to write another book, I'll write another foreword. As he himself, look, he said himself, that was an interesting book of ideas by somebody who's not proposing a manifesto for president. And I think to go back and try to take that apart is silly. But let me just use my time for a second, if I might, Brian. I served during the Reagan campaign with people like Jack Kemp and Art Laffer. We had an idea for job creation. I served as a freshman, or as a sophomore, helping pass the Reagan Jobs Program. At Newt.org, I put out last Friday the response to the Obama stagnation. The fact is, if you took the peak of the Reagan unemployment, which he inherited from Carter, by last Friday, going month by month under Ronald Reagan, we'd have 3,700,000 more Americans working. When I was Speaker, we added 11 million jobs in a bipartisan effort, including welfare reform, the largest capital gain tax cut in history. We balanced the budget for 4 straight years. The fact that President Obama doesn't come to the Reagan Library to try to figure out how to create jobs, doesn't talk to any of these 3 governors to learn how to create jobs, doesn't talk to Herman Cain to learn how to create jobs, tells you that this is a president so committed to class warfare and so committed to bureaucratic socialism that he can't possibly be effective in jobs.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. The questioning continues with John Harris.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. It didn't take you folks long to mix it up on the question of jobs. I'd like to turn to another subject that's been dominating this campaign. It's health care. Governor Romney, 4 years ago on this same stage, you had this to say about your record in Massachusetts.
opportunity for the entire country.
John?
Well, he had a lot more to say than that, didn't he?
Okay, I'm sorry, we had a little bit of a glitch right there. But, Governor, you said that it was what you did in Massachusetts was a great opportunity for the country. I'm going to get to you in just a minute. What I'd first like to do is ask if anyone else on this stage agrees that the Massachusetts example was a great opportunity for the rest of the country.
No.
No.
It was a great opportunity for us as a people to see what will not work, and that is an individual mandate in this country.
Got it. Well, that's actually, Governor Romney leads to my question. I've heard you on this many times before. You said some things about the Massachusetts law worked, other things didn't work as well. Let's go to what Governor Perry mentioned, the individual mandate. The government saying that people have to buy health insurance. Was that one of the things that worked in Massachusetts?
Let's step back and make sure I make something very clear from the very outset. I understand health care pretty darn well, having been through what I went through as a governor. And one thing I do on day one if I'm elected president is direct my Secretary of Health and Human Services to put out an executive order granting a waiver from Obamacare to all 50 states. It is bad law. It will not work, and I'll get that done in day one. Now, number two, what we faced in our state is different than what other states faced. What we had is a lot of people who found that they could simply stop getting insurance, go to the hospital, and get free care paid for by other people, paid for by taxpayers. We were spending hundreds of millions of dollars in our state giving care to people who in some cases could afford to take care of themselves. And we said, you know what? You've either got to get insurance if you can afford it, or you're going to have to help pay the cost of providing that care to you. And that was the approach that we took. It's a model that lets other states still take a look at it. Some parts of it have been copied by the states, some haven't. One thing I know, and that is that what President Obama put in place is not going to work. It's massively expensive. In our state, our plan covered 8% of the people, the uninsured. His plan is taking over 100% of the people, and the American people don't like it and should vote it down.
Thank you, Governor. Governor Perry, you clearly don't like the Massachusetts plan as an example for other states, but Massachusetts has nearly universal health insurance. It's first in the country. In Texas, about a quarter of the people don't have health insurance. That's 50 out of 50, dead last. And, sir, it's pretty hard to defend dead last.
Well, I'll tell you what the people of the state of Texas don't want. They don't want a health care plan like what Governor Romney put in place in Massachusetts. What they would like to see is the federal government get out of their business. For Medicaid, for instance. As a matter of fact, I bet Mitt and John would both agree, and I know Newt would as well. Medicaid needs to be block granted back to the states so that we can use the innovation in the states, come up with the best ways to deliver health care. My wife is a nurse, and I'll promise you, we understand that if we can get the federal government out of our business in the states when it comes to health care, we'll come up with ways to deliver more health care to more people cheaper than what the federal government is mandating today with their strings attached. Here's how you do it. One-size-fits-all effort out of Washington, D.C. That's got to stop. And I'll promise you, on day one, as the President of the United States, that executive order will be signed and Obamacare will be wiped out as much as it can be.
Governor, quick follow. Why are so many people in Texas uninsured?
Well, the bottom line is that we would not have that many people uninsured in the state of Texas if you didn't have the federal government. We've had requests in for years at the Health and Human Services agencies to have that type of flexibility, where we could have menus, where we could have co-pays, and the federal government refuses to give us that flexibility. We know for a fact that given that freedom, the states can do a better job of delivering health care, and you'll see substantially more people, not just in Texas, but all across the country, have access to better health care.
John?
Thank you.
John?
Just 1 minute. I'd like to go to Governor Huntsman, if I could, because at the heart of this is this argument about the individual mandate. Is it ever appropriate for government at any level, federal or state, to force people to buy health insurance?
Absolutely not. You know, at some point, we're going to get around to talking about individual and personal responsibility. And I'm raising 7 kids. I've got a couple of them here. The most important thing we can do in this health care debate, right, Rick, is talk about individual responsibility, personal responsibility. But I've got another solution for you with these 2 great governors over there, both of whom I like and admire. And I hate to tell you that the situation in Utah is pretty darn good, but I want to draw you to another example there. We embarked upon health care reform. We did better than Rick in terms of covering the uninsured, and we don't have a mandate. It allows the free market to create a marketplace of choices and options for people. I believe that once Obamacare is repealed, and it will be, the question will then be, what do we do now? And I'm here to tell you that what we did in Utah is going to be a perfect example of what we do now. We approach cost cutting, cost overruns, harmonizing medical records, which doctors will tell you is a hugely consequential deal, and expanding the marketplace for choices and options for individuals to choose from without a heavy-handed and expensive mandate that has caused, for the average family in Massachusetts, $2,500 to go
Thanks,
up.
Governor. Congresswoman Bachmann, let's turn to you. Is Governor Romney's support of an individual mandate in Massachusetts, is that disqualifying from the point of view of conservative voters?
Well, what I want to say is that Obamacare took over 1/6 of the American economy. And with all due respect to the governors, issuing an executive order will not overturn this massive law. This will take a very strong, bold leader in the presidency who will lead that effort. None of us should ever have ourselves think that the repeal bill will just come to our desk. It will take a very strong leader. I was the first member of Congress to introduce the bill to actually repeal Obamacare. As the nominee of the Republican Party, it will be my business to make sure that I elect also 13 more Republican senators who will help me repeal Obamacare. This is the issue of 2012, together with jobs. This is our window of opportunity. If we fail to repeal Obamacare in 2012, it will be with us forever, and it will be socialized medicine. It must be gone now, and as President of the United States, I won't rest until I repeal Obamacare.
Speaker Gingrich, it sounds like we've got a genuine philosophical disagreement. In Massachusetts, a mandate, almost no one uninsured. In Texas, a more limited approach, about a quarter uninsured. Who's got the better end of this argument?
Well, I'm frankly not interested in your effort to get Republicans fighting each other.
Speaker Gingrich, we've got a choice. I'm not interested in a fight, but we've got a choice between the individual mandate and not. So anyway, go ahead.
You would like to puff this up into some giant thing. The fact is, every person up here understands Obamacare is a disaster. It is a disaster procedurally. It was rammed through after they lost Teddy Kennedy's seat in Massachusetts. It was written badly. It was never reconciled. It can't be implemented. It is killing this economy. And if this president had any concern for working Americans, he'd walk in Thursday night and ask us to repeal it because it's a monstrosity. Every person up here agrees with that.
Right. Yep.
And let me just say, since I still have a little time left, let me just say, I, for one, and I hope all of my friends up here, are going to repudiate every effort of the news media to get Republicans to fight each other to protect Barack Obama, who deserves to be defeated, and all of us are committed as a team. Whoever the nominee is, we are all for defeating Barack Obama.
Mr. Cain, Mr. Cain, I'd like you to get in this, but my understanding of why conservatives don't like the Obama plan, the individual mandate, is at the heart of it. So this is a genuine philosophical disagreement that I'd like your view on. Is the individual mandate ever justified at the state level or the federal level?
No. An individual mandate to buy something is not constitutional. Now, back in the early 1990s, I worked with Speaker Gingrich to fight Hillary Care. I have been outspoken fighting Obamacare, which needs to be repealed. Now I'm running against RomneyCare. Neither one of them works. Here's what I would do. Let's pass patient-centered, market-driven reforms. Loser pay laws. Some people call it tort reform. Loser pay laws. Let's expand medical savings accounts versus what the president did in Obamacare. He shrunk health savings accounts. Let's allow association health plans. When I ran the National Restaurant Association, today it has 14 million people. We wanted to put together a plan that would be tailored to the constituency of that industry. We could not do it. We would have been able to do it cheaper and cover more people if we didn't have the restrictions that are out there today that are preventing the free market from bringing down costs and increasing access.
Mr. Cain, thank you.